Last night I gave a speech at Ryerson University in downtown Toronto. I was invited by the Conservative Students Club and a pro-Israel Students Club, and they wanted to ask my thoughts on everything really, Canada, the Middle East, journalism, the rising tide of left-wing fascism on universities. That's a lot to talk about. But more than that, I just knew in my bones that the speech itself would become part of the conversation, as in I just knew that left-wing extremists, including far-left fascists, politically correct censors, anti-American, anti-Israel wackos, the whole professional protesting scene, I knew they wouldn't just be a subject for discussion, I knew they would be there too. I knew it because that's become the central defining characteristic of today's militant left, censoring their opponents. As in, I knew they wouldn't be there to debate me or even really to heckle me. They would be there to try to stop me. They have given that a fancy term, actually, deplatforming, as in make it impossible for me to even speak, and more importantly, make it impossible for anyone to even listen to me. I knew this would happen because it's been happening more and more. They tried it against Donald Trump, for example, when he went to Chicago to give a big campaign speech. Remember that? Trump should have known better. Chicago has always been a bit of a Democrat criminal town, professional protest town. So they rioted against him, paid left-wing protesters, rioted, attacked police cars, that sort of thing. But again, it wasn't to debate Trump or even to argue against him. It was to shut him down with violence and threats of violence, and it worked. Trump canceled the event because police couldn't control the situation. It's been getting worse. Earlier this year, when right-wing gadfly Milo Yiannopoulos was invited to speak at the University of California, Berkeley, invited as in students there asked for him to come. This wasn't something he himself imposed. Not only did the far-left activists deplatform him, they positively rioted, smashing windows as per usual. And the president of the University of California system, who just happens to be a former Obama cabinet secretary, she didn't intervene to stop the riots. And it started happening to our own rebel journalists too. So not only smashing journalists and commentators and pundits when they go to speak, but even when they go out to do their work. Remember when University of Toronto students physically assaulted Lauren Southern at a protest?
Smile at me, bitch. What you want?
Remember when Sheila Gunn Reid was assaulted by an NDP supporter, a so-called male feminist, at a women's march in January?
I will break your camera. You do not have the right to...
Guys, stop. Let's calm down. Calm down.
Remember when Gavin McInnes was pepper sprayed in the face by left-wing extremists when he was invited to go speak to a university in New York City? And of course, just a month ago, I myself was invited to speak at the University of Toronto. There were tons of police there, plus private security, but masked left-wing fascist thugs stormed into the university, flipped over tables, and when police stopped them from actually entering the classroom where we were, they pulled the fire alarm and the police had to evict us from the building itself. They actually called our reporter, Jay Feza, a racist.
White supremacy! Fuck white supremacy!
I guess.
Fuck white supremacy! Fuck white supremacy!
I'm not a white supremacist. They think I'm white supremacist.
Fuck white supremacy!
I don't believe in white supremacy.
Yeah, no, he's black, you're white. But they say that a lot, don't they? Actually, here's one where they plain old call him racist names to show how tolerant they are.
I ran into Kigali at a free speech rally a few days ago, and while an Ethiopian man was speaking about his father's oppression of speech, she yelled at him that he was a
and so
coon.
was his family, and so was my family. And he came to this country.
Yeah, none of that is even debating or even heckling. It's personal insults, but it's also plain old disruptions, like when they blasted Professor Jordan Peterson with white noise machines at his rally at U of T. That was him at U of T, and here he is just a week ago at McMaster. Do you really need any more examples? And all this is completely aided and abetted by the liberal media. Have you ever seen a journalist ask an NDP or liberal politician to disown leftist disruptions or even violence? Of course not. because leftist politicians like it, because it helps them, and the journalists don't mind either. So I knew a few of the same things were going to happen last night. I mean, I could tell when the group that invited me changed the venue of my speech at the last moment, moving it to a less open, more controllable space. That move, though, probably cut the number of students who attended in half. Anyways, I showed up, and shortly thereafter, a group of professional protesters showed up too. That's not an insult, that's an observation. For example, the Canadian Federation of Students had a rep there. That's a professional far-left lobby group that hates conservatives. They handed out rape whistles. I'm only laughing because, of course, no one there was being raped. They were using these to interrupt our event with extremely loud whistles. And students have to pay for these whistles with their student fees, passed off as feminist protectors. There was all sorts of prefabricated signs there. Signs against white supremacists. Yeah, guys, I'm not a Nazi, I'm a Jew. White supremacists don't typically have a lot of time for Jews. They also had a prefab sign that I'd seen before, like this one that refers to Aboriginal land. I've seen that same sign at Idle No More protests, I think. Last night it was held by non-Aboriginal white leftists, and just like it was actually the Idle No More rally. Anyways, credit to campus security and to police. They took the situation pretty seriously. They had a pretty big team there. They kept the thugs out, so thanks, guys. But for some reason, these professional protesters were still permitted on school property to deploy emergency sirens and other blasting sounds, not just the rape whistles, for 90 minutes. Here, just take a quick listen.
But if they were successful in censoring me with the power of the state,
it was hard to think. It was hard to speak. It was hard for anyone to hear me. Why was that permitted? Would the police chief permit that in his own office, right outside the door of his suite? Would the mayor permit that right in City Hall? Would NDP or Liberal MPs permit that in their property? Of course not. So why is that permitted for 90 minutes straight in the university building? Hey, can you name me a single instance ever, not only here in Canada, but anywhere in North America, where a left-wing group is subjected to this conduct from right-wingers? Have you ever heard of conservatives smashing up a left-wing meeting? I know of environmental extremists vandalizing things, storming things, but have you ever heard of young oil and gas workers smashing up a Greenpeace meeting? Have you ever heard of young Christians smashing up a pro-choice meeting? Have you ever heard of pro-Israel or Jewish groups disrupting a Muslim meeting? Never, not one. Name one. Have you ever heard of conservatives punching liberal journalists? Of course not. Never happened. Not even once. We here at the Rebel, we have to hire paid bodyguards for our journalists now, especially our female journalists, since left-wing men punch them all the time. I had several security last night that we had to pay for. Have you ever heard of a liberal journalist or pundit needing private security just to avoid being punched? They were nuts. They were incoherent. They were stupid. They were a rent-a-mob. They really just showed up and were handed placards. Last week it was a different subject. Next week it'll be a different subject. They'll be given placards, told what to chant, not to debate. They know nothing.
You think I'm a racist, right? Do you have any intellectual argument? Any intellectual argument?
They were so stupid. Hey, just for fun, can I show you something from a protest I went to a few years ago? Son, you're gonna laugh at this. I want to prove to you how know-nothing these professional protesters are. You think I'm making that up? You think I'm insulting? No. Watch this. I was joking around a bit, but take a look at this.
Is there any other reporter you won't talk to besides the Sun?
No.
Is it because I'm critical of the Line 9 protesters?
It's because Ezra, you know.
And what do you think of Ezra?
Well, he's connected with ethical oil, unethical oil.
And if you had one message to say to Ezra, what would it be?
No comment.
Do you think Ezra's going to show up today?
I have no idea. No idea.
What do you think Ezra looks like? Do you think he's ugly?
Does that matter what his appearance looks like?
He thinks he's ugly.
Well, then...
He's got a low body self-image.
Well, that's his issue.
Any last messages for Ezra if I see him?
No.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Yeah, she sure knew she didn't like that Ezra Levant. Someone told her not to like Ezra Levant. I'll pass the message on. See, that's the thing. These weren't passionate, informed young people. They were zombies, robots, cult members. I mean, get a load of this.
Why am I racist? Why am I... Stop giving white supremacy a platform. How am I giving white supremacy a platform? These guys think I'm a white supremacist. These guys think I'm racist for some reason.
Yeah, if you're shouting down a black man, you just might be a racist. Anyways, let me tell you the highlight or the low light of the evening, depending where you're coming from. So I was giving a talk. I spoke for about 45 minutes or so. Then I answered questions for another 45. There were some dissenters in the room, by the way, some hardcore leftists in the room, some other reporters. That's fine. There were some Muslim activists who came there to engage me. Politely, I gave them each several questions. I'm glad they were there. I wanted to encourage them to put their toughest questions to me to make it more interesting, and they did. And we agreed to disagree, but I'm actually really glad that they were there. Smart guys, a couple of smart guys. But I was in the middle of answering one question, and suddenly a row of 5 or 6 activists who had been sitting perfectly quietly the whole time, they stood up. They hadn't said a word during my speech. They hadn't said anything during question, but they stood up. I'll show you in a second what they did. But before I do, let me just say, none of them asked me a question. It was question time. I answered anyone's questions or comments. These 5 or 6 activists didn't have any. They didn't put their hand up. They didn't even heckle. They sat there like sleeping zombies who suddenly awoke. Here, let me show you how it went down.
The Muslim population is...
No Islamophobia! No white supremacy! No Islamophobia!
Hey guys, don't shut down a Jew.
Don't shut down a Jew! Don't shut down a Jew!
Bye-bye! Bye-bye!
I know I was really irritating there. That finger wagging, that chanting, that's normally not what I do, I promise. It was childish, I know. But I thought maybe, for once, we're not going to concede the streets to these street thugs. We won't punch them or pepper spray them, but we'll chant back at them, and we will push them out of our meeting room and get back to our meeting. We push them out the doors. They were welcome there if they wanted to be participants. They were welcome to ask tough questions, but not to bully us like fascists. I thought, let's do it. I mean, look at them. Did you see them? So sickly, probably all vegetarians. Lame, leftist zombies. That guy looked a bit anemic. I'm an out-of-shape old man, and I thought even I could take him. And so they were shouting at me, disrupting our event. Think about it. They were really the fascists, the new brown shirts, trying to shout off the stage a Jewish speaker at an event partly about Jewish issues. And they had the chutzpah to claim that they were the anti-bigots. No, sir. No, sir. Don't shout down Jews. Don't shout down Jews. Don't push them out of universities. We don't do that in Canada. That's a bit too Nuremberg laws-ish, a bit too Kristallnacht-ish for me. If you try your brown shirt tactics here, we will call you like we see you. You're the fascists. And yeah, don't come to a politically correct insult fight unarmed. I'm not an anti-Semite. I don't really know if they were, but shouting down a Jew at an invitation from a pro-Israel club, yeah, I'm going to point out that that's just a wee bit Nazi-ish. I mean, who storms a public event trying to shout down a Jewish speaker at a Jewish event? I'm going to guess Nazis do. Now, I don't throw the word Nazi around a lot, but I thought it was a pretty good rebuttal to their lameness. And we drove those fascists out of the room, we pushed them out the door, and then we went back to our event. What do you think? What do you think of finally having some self-respect, finally proving our commitment to free speech and open debate? Yeah, they triggered us, so we made a safe space. We kicked the fascists out. And I think our side should do it every single time. What do you think?